And I guess everybody here is a dignitary, and I appreciate your help. And by the way, I am serious about the food. Bring in, don't slow down. So just come in, clear the places, but Hillary has to eat her beets. I'm gonna, because the table is small enough and the room is intimate enough, I'd like to spend our time responding to questions you have, listening to advice you might have. Occasionally, as I did just a moment ago, I get envelopes like that, and I'll open this and there'll be campaign ideas. Why don't you talk about the following issue? So I'm happy to take advice, and then we can all vote on whether it's a good piece of advice or bad advice. And so we'll get a chance to do that. But I'm looking to get your perspectives. I just tell you a couple of things you may not know about me. You probably know that I'm father of 5 and grandfather now of 18. My oldest son just had twins just last week, and so our grandchild nest is getting larger, and they're a source of great joy. When I was probably halfway through my career at Bain Consulting, I met with a lawyer to draft a will. And she said, how do you want to divide what estate you might eventually have? And I said, I didn't have anything at that point. I said, I want to divide it equally among my 5 sons. And she said, well, how much will you want to give to the grandchildren that they will ultimately have? And I said, well, I don't want to give anything to the grandchildren. I'll give it to the sons, and they in turn will give it to their children as needed. And she said, you'll change your mind. I said, no, I don't think so. So I saw her not long ago, and I said, I don't want to give anything to my sons. I want to give
You lost Samantha's vote.
It's not just.
This is my daughter.
It's not just because I love my grandchildren as I do. I love my sons and daughters-in-law. It's that I'm very concerned about what the nation is going to be like over the coming decade or two. And I really do, as I said in my remarks earlier, I see these 2 very different scenarios. One is as America really powering the world economy with an extraordinary economy here, with China working with us, wanting to see stability in the world, and a very vibrant America with freedom and prosperity for the great bulk of the American people. On the other hand, I really do see something like Europe, and I think that's the path we're on right now. So that's why I want to make sure that what little I'll have left after the campaigns goes to my grandchildren. That's one piece about me that you may not know. The other is just about my heritage. My dad, you probably know, was the governor of Michigan and was the head of a car company, but he was born in Mexico. And had he been born of Mexican parents, I'd have a better shot of winning this, but he was unfortunately born of Americans living in Mexico. They lived there for a number of years, and I mean, I say that jokingly, but it would be helpful to be Latino. And
Elizabeth Warren.
Pardon? That's right. I can go out and say, those that don't know Elizabeth Warren, she is the woman who's running for U.S. Senate in Massachusetts, who said that she's Cherokee, and has put in her application over the years that she's Cherokee, and Harvard put down that she's one of their minority faculty members. It turns out that at most she's 1/32nd Cherokee, and even that can't be proven. So in any event, yeah, I could put down my dad was born in Mexico and leave it at that. But his dad was in construction, very successful in Mexico, but in America went broke more than once. So my dad never had the money or time to get a college degree. Without a college degree, became head of a big car company and ultimately a governor. And believed in America, believed in the opportunity of this country, never doubted for a moment that he could achieve his dreams. And Ann's dad, my wife's dad, was born in Wales. His dad was a coal miner. This coal miner got injured in a coal mining accident. Realizing that there was no future there for him or his 4 children, he came to Detroit and worked in the auto factories until he could save enough money to bring his kids over, which he did. And then they got together as a family and said, you know, to be successful in America, you've got to get an education. And they couldn't afford an education. And the kids and the parents said, you know, if we all work and we all save, we could afford to send one of us to college. And they sent my wife's dad. Can you imagine working every day, taking a couple of jobs and saving your money so that your brother could go to, I mean, I would never do that for my brother. So he went to college and got a degree at the General Motors Institute of Technology, which is one of these programs where you work a semester and then you go to school a semester. And then after it was over, he started a little company. He became more successful, and he was able to hire his brothers and his brother-in-law and provide for them in an extraordinary way. By the way, both my dad and Ann's dad did quite well in their lives, but when they came to the end of their lives and passed along inheritances to Ann and to me, we both decided to give it all away. So I have inherited nothing. Everything that Ann and I have, we earned the old-fashioned way, and that's by hard work. I say that only because...
You just lost Samantha's vote for a second time.
I say that because there's a perception that, oh, you were born with a silver spoon, you know, you never had to earn anything and so forth. And frankly, I was born with a silver spoon, which is the greatest gift you can have, which is to get born in America. I'll tell you, there is, 95% of life is set up for you if you're born in this country. And I remember going to sorry just to bore you with stories, but when I was back in my private equity days, we went to China to buy a factory there. It employed about 20,000 people, and they were almost all young women between the ages of about 18 and 22 or 23. They were saving for potentially becoming married, and they worked in these huge factories. They made various small appliances, and as we were walking through this facility, seeing them work, the number of hours they worked per day, the pittance they earned, living in dormitories with little bathrooms at the end of maybe 10 rooms. And in the rooms, they had 12 girls per room, 3 bunk beds on top of each other. I mean, you've seen it.
Oh, yeah.
And around this factory was a fence, a huge fence with barbed wire and guard towers. And we said, gosh, I can't believe that you keep these girls in. They said, no, this is to keep other people from coming in. Because people want so badly to come work in this factory that we have to keep them out, or they'll just come in here and start working and try and get compensated. So this is to keep people out. And they said, actually, at Chinese New Year, as the girls go home, sometimes they decide they've saved enough money and they don't come back to the factory. And he said, and so on the weekend after Chinese New Year, there'll be a line of people, hundreds long, outside the factory, hoping that some girls haven't come back and they can come to the factory. And so as we were experiencing this for the first time for me to see a factory like this in China some years ago, the main partner I was with turned to me and said, 95% of life is settled if you're born in America. This is an amazing land. And what we have is unique, and fortunately it is so special. We're sharing it with the world. I'm concerned about the future, but also optimistic, as I said. And I look forward to getting America back on track and having people plan on bringing their ideas and their dreams to this country. We need big dreamers, by the way. We didn't talk about immigration today. Gosh, I'd like to bring in more legal immigrants that have skill and knowledge. I'd like to staple a green card to every PhD in the world and say, come to America, we want you here. Instead, we make it hard for people who get educated here or elsewhere to make this their home. Unless, of course, you have no skill or experience, in which case you're welcome to cross the border and stay here the rest of your life. It's a very strange setting run by people who don't understand that we're in a global competition of ideas. And our idea has to win, but only if America remains strong. Well, with that as an introduction, I'm going to turn to you for counsel, advice, or questions. Policy questions. You want to talk about tax policy? Or political questions? How I win? Please.
One comment, Governor.
Yes.
The debates are going to be coming, and I hope at the right moment you can turn to President Obama, look at the American people and say, if you vote to re-elect President Obama, you're voting to bankrupt the United States. I hope you keep that in your quiver, because that's what's going to happen, and I think it's going to be very effective. I just want to make that comment.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's the former head of Goldman Sachs, John Whitehead, was also the former head of the New York Federal Reserve, and I met with him, and he said as soon as the Fed stops buying all the debt that we're issuing, which they've been doing, the Fed's buying like 3/4 of the debt that America issues. He says, what's that over? That's over. He said we're going to have a failed Treasury auction. Interest rates are going to have to go up. You know, we're living in this borrowed fantasy world where the government keeps on borrowing money. You know, we borrow this extra $1 trillion a year. We wonder, well, who's loaning us $1 trillion? The Chinese aren't loaning us anymore. The Russians aren't loaning it to us anymore. So who's giving us $1 trillion? And the answer is we're just making it up. The Federal Reserve is just taking it and saying, here, we're giving it. It's just made up money. And this does not augur well for our economic future. You know, some of these things are complex enough. It's not easy for people to understand. But your point of saying bankruptcy usually concentrates the mind. Yeah, George?
Governor, to your point on complexity.
Yeah.
How, as you travel around America and talk to people in larger groups, and perhaps people with different backgrounds than people in this room, to what extent do people really understand that we're hurtling toward a cliff? And to what extent do people really understand the severity of the fiscal situation we're in? People get it?
They don't. I mean, by and large, people don't get it. People in our party, in part it's our fault because we've been talking about deficits and debt for about 25 or 30 years as a party, and so they've heard us say it and say it and say it. The fact that Greece is going through what it's going through, and they read about France and Italy and Spain, has finally made this issue topical for the American people. And so when you do polls and you ask people what is the biggest issue in the 2012 election, number one is the economy and jobs by a wide margin, but number two is the deficit. And but debt and that doesn't calculate for folks, but the deficit does. They recognize you can't go on forever like this. Although the people who recognize that tend to be Republican, and the people who don't recognize it tend to be Democrat. And what we have to get is that 5 or 10% in the middle who sometimes vote Republican, sometimes vote Democrat, and have them understand how important this is. I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, I did the calculation for folks today, and USA Today publishes this every year. It's a front page story, the headline once a year, but somehow escapes people's attention. And that is, if you take the total national debt and the unfunded liabilities of Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid, the amount of debt plus unfunded liabilities per household in America is $520,000 per household.
It's like 12 times their income, right?
At least.
10 times.
Yeah, 10, 12 times their income. And even though we're not going to be writing a check for that amount per household, they're going to be paying the interest on that. You will be paying the interest on that. Because my generation will be long gone, and you'll be paying the interest. And so you'll be paying taxes, not only for the things you want in your generation, but for all the things we spent money on, which is just, I mean, it's extraordinary to think that tax rates, someone calculated what would happen if we don't change Medicare or Social Security. The tax rate, you know what the payroll tax is now, it's 15.3%. If we don't change those programs, that tax rate will have to ultimately rise to 44%, the payroll tax. Then there's the income tax on top, which the president wants to take to 40%. Then there's state tax in most states, and sales tax and so you end up having to take 100% of people's income. And yet the president, 3.5 years in, won't talk about reforming Social Security or Medicare. And when the Republicans do, it's oh, you're throwing Granny off the cliff. It's like, you're killing the kids. The biggest surprise that I have is that young people will vote for a Democrat. They look at this and say, holy cow, the only guys that are worried about the future of our country and our future are Republicans. But the Democrats, you know, they talk about social issues, draw in the young people, and they vote on that issue. It's like, I mean, there won't be any houses like this if we stay on the road we're on. Please, yeah. I heard a voice. I'm sorry, please.
Governor Romney, we are former Bostonians.
Oh.
Yeah. We'll talk about how we know you.
Uh-oh.
No, good.
Yeah, okay. Oh, see, I get it over here.
We totally agree with what you said economically, but I would like to know, And I would like you, and I would like there to be much more discussion on what I consider the real big issues. And the real big issues are Iran. And how would your point of view differ from President Obama's?
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, start eating. Those of you who have food in front of you, it's warm, and start eating. And this is meant to, I'm standing up so I can see you, but I'm not standing up so that you have to stop and look at me. So, and it's important to look at your food as you're eating it, all right? Don't want to see you putting a fork in your finger here. I mean, you are right, which is a nuclear Iran is an unthinkable outcome. Not just for our friends in Israel and our friends in Europe, but also for us. Because Iran is the state sponsor of terror in the world, has Hezbollah now throughout Latin America, Hezbollah with fissile material. I mean, if I were Iran, I mean, and a crazed fanatic, I'd say, let's get a little fissile material to Hezbollah, have them carry it to Chicago or some other place, and then if anything goes wrong or America starts acting up, we'll just say, hey, guess what? Unless you stand down, why we're going to let off a dirty bomb. I mean, this is where we head, where America can be held up and blackmailed by Iran, by the mullahs, by crazy people. So, so we really don't have any option but to keep Iran from having a nuclear weapon. I'll give the specific on Iran and then maybe talk more broadly about foreign policy. The specific on Iran is we should have put in place crippling sanctions at the beginning of the president's term. We did not. He will say yes, but Russia wouldn't go along with this. Well, he gave Russia their #1 foreign policy objective. For a decade, all they've cared about is getting the missile defense sites out of Poland. And he gave them that and got nothing in return. He could have, I presume, gotten them to agree to crippling sanctions against Iran. He did not, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest foreign policy errors of the modern time. And by the way, if he could not have gotten that from Russia, he should have kept the missile defense sites in Poland, just to keep a bargaining chip on the table. I mean, you know, put nothing in him if he wants to. I mean, I would have kept them. I would have traded them away, but that's where he was. #2, we should have been aggressively supporting the voices of dissent in Iran. And when there was an effort towards revolution there, we should have been aggressively supporting it. And finally, we should have made it clear, at least by now, that we have military plans to potentially remove their nuclear capabilities. That doesn't mean we actually pull the trigger, but it means that we communicate to them that we're ready to do so, and that it is unacceptable to America to have a nuclear Iran. Instead, what this administration has done is communicate to the Iranians that we're more worried about Israel attacking them than we are about them becoming nuclear. It's extraordinary. So those are some thoughts directly at Iran. I'll step back on foreign policy. The president's foreign policy, in my opinion, is formed in part by a perception he has that his magnetism and his charm and his persuasiveness is so compelling that he can sit down with people like Putin and Chavez and Ahmadinejad, and that they'll find we're such wonderful people that they'll go along with us, and that they'll stop doing bad things. And it's an extraordinarily naive perception, and it has led to huge errors in North Korea, in Iraq, obviously in Iran, in Egypt, around the world. My own view is that the centerpiece of American foreign policy has to be strength. Everything I do will be calculated to increasing America's strength. When you stand by your allies, you increase your strength. When you attack your allies, you become weaker. When you stand by your principles, you get stronger. When you have a big military that's bigger than anyone else's, you're strong. When you have a strong economy, you build American strength. For me, everything is about strength. And communicating to people what is and is not acceptable. It's speaking softly but carrying a very, very, very big stick. And this president instead speaks loudly and carries a tiny stick. And that is, that's not the right course for a foreign policy. I saw Dr. Kissinger in New York. You're not eating. I'm mesmerized. Yeah. He's more than tears. Come on. I saw Dr. Kissinger. I said to him, how are we perceived around the world? And he said, one word, weak. that's how this president is perceived by our friends and unfortunately by our foes. And it's no wonder that people like Kim Jong-un, the new leader of North Korea, announces a long-range missile test only a week after he said he wouldn't. Because it's like, what's this president going to do about it? You know, if you can't act, why don't threaten him? Please.
Just to follow on the Iraq.
I'm going to taste this, by the way. Yes. Yeah, I just want to show you how it's done. You take this in your fork. Put it in. Yeah.
Jimmy Carter was president.
I'm good. Please, go ahead.
When Jimmy Carter was president, we had hostages. Ronald Reagan was able to make a statement even before he was actually sworn in.
Yeah.
The hostages were released.
On the day of his inauguration.
Right.
Yeah.
So my question is really, how can we sort of duplicate that scenario?
Oh.
This time?
I'm going to ask you, how do I duplicate that scenario?
I think it had to do with the fact that the Iranians perceived Reagan would do something to really get them out.
Yeah.
In other words, that he would have the strength, and that's why I'm following on what you said about strength.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm suggesting that something that you say over the next few months gets the Iranians to understand that their pursuit of a bomb is something that you would predict. And I think that that's something that could possibly resonate very well with the American public and others.
I appreciate the idea. I can't, one of the things that's frustrating to me is that in a typical day like this, when I do 3 or 4 events like this, the number of foreign policy questions I get are between 0 and 1. And the American people are not concentrated at all upon China, on Russia, Iran, Iraq. This president's failure to put in place a status of forces agreement allowing 10,000 to 20,000 troops to stay in Iraq, unthinkable. And yet, in that election, in the Jimmy Carter election, the fact that we had hostages in Iran, I mean, that was all we talked about. And we had the 2 helicopters crash in the desert. I mean, that was the focus. And so him solving that made all the difference in the world. I'm afraid today, if you said we got Iran to agree to stand down and use their weapon, they go, you know, hold on. It's really, but other ways, if something of that nature presents itself, I will work to find a way to take advantage of the opportunity. Please. Yes.
Such that's your lucky night. More foreign policy.
Yes.
You're married.
We did actually the first time you were in Jerusalem, and we appreciate you being there. How do you think that the Palestinian problem can be solved, and what are you going to do about it?
I'm torn by 2 perspectives in this regard. One is the one which I've had for some time, which is that the Palestinians have no interest whatsoever in establishing peace, and that the pathway to peace is almost unthinkable to accomplish. Now, why do I say that? Some might say, well, just let the Palestinians have the West Bank and have security and set up a separate nation for the Palestinians. And then come a couple of thorny questions. And I don't have a map here to look at the geography, but the border between Israel and the West Bank is obviously right there, right next to Tel Aviv, which is the financial capital, the industrial capital of Israel, the center of Israel. It's what the border would be, maybe 7 miles from Tel Aviv to what would be the West Bank. 9 miles. Okay, I came close. 9 miles. The challenge is the other side of the West Bank.
Don't go head to head.
Yeah. The other side of the West Bank. The other side of what would be this new Palestinian state would either be Syria at one point or Jordan. And of course the Iranians would want to do through the West Bank exactly what they did through Lebanon, what they did in Gaza, which is the Iranians who want to bring missiles and armament into the West Bank and potentially threaten Israel. So Israel, of course, would have to say, that can't happen. We've got to keep the Iranians from bringing weaponry into the West Bank. Well, that means that who? The Israelis are going to patrol the border between Jordan, Syria, and this new Palestinian nation? Well, the Palestinians would say, no way. We're an independent country. You can't guard our border with other Arab nations. And then how about the import? How about flying into this Palestinian nation? Are we going to allow military aircraft to come in? And weaponry to come in? And if not, who's going to keep it from coming in? Well, the Israelis. Well, the Palestinians are going to say, we're not an independent nation if Israel is able to come in and tell us what can land at our airport. These are problems, and they're very hard to solve, all right? And I look at the Palestinians not wanting to see peace anyway, for political purposes, committed to the destruction and elimination of Israel, and these thorny issues, and I say, there's just no way. And so what you do is you say you move things along the best way you can, you hope for some degree of stability, but you recognize this is going to remain an unsolved problem. I mean, we live with that in China and Taiwan. All right, we have a potentially volatile situation, but we sort of live with it. And we kick the ball down the field and hope that ultimately somehow something will happen and resolve it. We don't go to war to try and resolve it imminently. On the other hand, I got a call from a former Secretary of State. I won't mention which one it was, but this individual said to me, I think there's a prospect for a settlement between the Palestinians and the Israelis after the Palestinian elections. I said, really? And his answer was yes. I think there's some prospect. And I didn't delve into it, but I always keep open. I mean, I don't always keep open the idea, but I have to tell you, the idea of pushing on the Israelis to give something up, to get the Palestinians to act, is the worst idea in the world. We have done that time and time and time again. It does not work. So the only answer is show strength. Again, American strength, American resolve. And if the Palestinians someday reach a point where they want peace, more than we're trying to force peace on them, and then it's worth having the discussions. But till then, it's just wishful thinking. Please.
You guys sit down.
I need to, don't you know this?
Afterwards?
Please, don't keep going.
I paid like $12 for that slot.
Now that's my mouth.
Individuals in this room obviously are your supporters. I am very concerned about the average American who doesn't know you. There is a terrible misconception, and I spend numerous hours trying to, I hate being a pretender when you are such a deserving individual. Years and years ago, I called George Bush Sr., and he had helped me in my campaign in Massachusetts when I ran for Senate. I told him that there is a guy named Clinton who's going to beat him for the following reasons, and he laughed. Right now, I'm very concerned. Women do not want to vote for you. Hispanics, majority of them do not want to vote for you. College students don't. After talking to them and explaining and rationalizing on a one-on-one basis, we are able to change their opinions. But on a mass level, what do you want us to do, this group here, as your emissaries, going out to convert these individuals to someone who's obviously going to be such an incredible asset to this country? We want you. But
Well,
what do we do? Just tell us how we can help.
I have some good news for you. It's not impossible. And the reason I say that is, for instance, the New York Times had a poll last week, New York Times and NBC, and I was leading by 2 points among women. All right, now the president came out and said this is an outrageous poll, they don't know what they're doing, but by the way, the polls at this stage make no difference at all. But the point is, women are open to supporting me, they like the president personally, but they're disappointed. They're disappointed with the jobs they're seeing for their kids, they're disappointed with their own economic standing right now. So we can capture women's vote. We're having a much harder time with Hispanic voters. And if the Hispanic voting bloc becomes as committed to the Democrats as the African American voting bloc has in the past, why we're in trouble as a party and I think as a nation.
Rubio.
Exactly.
And
Hey, come on. Okay.
and so we have some great we have some great Hispanic leaders in our party that will help communicate what our party stands for. And frankly, what I need you to do is to raise millions of dollars, because the president's going to have about $800 or $900 million. That's by far the most important thing you can do. Because you don't have the capacity to speak to hundreds of thousands of people. I will be in those debates. There will be, I don't know, 150 million Americans watching. If I do well, it'll help. If I don't, it won't help.
You will do so well. Your debates are incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. But advertising makes a difference, and the president will engage in a personal character assassination campaign, and so we'll have to fire back, one, in defense, and number two, in offense. And that'll take money. By the way, you'll see the ads here. Florida will be one of those states that is the key state, and so all the money will get spent in 10 states, and this is one of them. So the best thing I could ask you to do, I mean, yeah, sure, talk to people and tell them how you know me, and word of mouth makes a big difference. But you know, I'm not terribly well known by the general American public, because we've gone
As a
through.
rich boy. I mean, they say he's a rich
They
man.
but don't worry, given all those negative things, the fact that I'm either tied or close to the president, and the fact that, you know, that he's out there talking about the 1-year anniversary of Osama bin Laden being captured, unemployment coming down, unleashing his campaign, new campaign, and we're still sort of tied, that's very interesting, and as encouraging. Please.
I would disagree with that. I think a lot of young children coming out of college feel they were let down by the president. They feel that there's not a job out there for them, and they thought they were going to make $60,000, now they're making $30,000. You know, very similar to the U6.
Yeah.
My question to you is, why don't you stick up for yourself? To me, you should be so proud of your role. That's what we all aspire to. We kill ourselves. We don't work 9 to 5. We're away from our families 5 days a week. I'm away from my 4 girls 5 days a week, my wife. Why not stick up for yourself and say, why is it bad to aspire to be wealthy and successful? You know, why is it bad to kill yourself, and why is it bad to cut 30 jobs to protect 300? And when people talk about you cutting jobs, you saved companies that were failing in terms of these 2 jobs. So my question is, when is that?
Well,
Each neighborhood and worked his way up from nothing to being incredibly successful entrepreneur. So,
you heard in my speech tonight, I talked to begin, but oh, you weren't here.
he came here early, so he missed the.
In every stump speech I give, I speak about the fact that people who dream and achieve enormous success do not make us poorer, they make us better off. And the Republican audience that I typically speak to are blocked. I said that tonight, and the media's there, and they write about it. They say that Romney defends success in America and dreamers and so forth. So they write about it. But in terms of what gets through to the American consciousness, I have very little influence on that at this stage as to what they write about. And that will happen. We'll have 3 debates. We'll have a chance to talk about that in the debates. There will be ads which attack me. I will fire back in a way that describes, in the best way we can, the fact that the theme of my speech is that I wind up, and you know, the ambassadors heard me today several times. I wind up talking about how the thing which I find most disappointing in this president is his attack of one American against another American, the division of America based on going after those who have been successful. And then I quote Marco Rubio. I tell in my speeches, I say, Marco Rubio, I can't remember that I said that. I don't know that I said that at the fundraising event earlier today, but I did when I was in where? Exactly. I just said, Senator Rubio says that when he grew up here, poor, that they looked at people that had a lot of wealth, and his parents never once said, we need some of what they have. They should give us some. Instead, they said, if we work hard and go to school, someday we might be able to have that. And I will continue to do that. How much of that gets picked up? There's so many things that don't get picked up in a campaign. because people aren't watching yet. By the way, most people don't watch during the summer. We're going to go into a season here starting from mid-June, where almost there's no attention paid. Then after Labor Day in September and October, that's when it'll get declined.
For the past 3 years, all everybody's been told is, don't worry, we'll take care of it. How are you going to do it in 2 months before the elections to convince everybody you got to take care of yourself?
Well, there are 47% of the people who will vote for the president no matter what. All right, there are 47% who are with him, who are dependent upon government, who believe that they are victims, who believe that government has a responsibility to care for them, who believe that they're entitled to health care, to food, to housing, to you name it. It's an entitlement, and the government should give it to them. And they will vote for this president no matter what. And I mean, the president starts off with 48, 49, 40, he starts off with a huge number. These are people who pay no income tax. 47% of Americans pay no income tax. So our message of low taxes doesn't connect. And he'll be out there talking about tax cuts for the rich. I mean, that's what they sell every 4 years. And so my job is not to worry about those people. I'll never convince them that they should take personal responsibility and care for their lives. What I have to do is convince the 5 to 10% in the center that are independent, that are thoughtful, that look at voting one way or the other depending upon, in some cases, emotion, whether they like the guy or not, what it looks like. I mean, when you ask those people, we do all these polls. I find it amazing. We poll all these people to see where you stand in polls. But 45% of the people will vote for the Republican, and 48 or 49